Warm welcome to everybody today. This is our 11th webinar in our talk series. And I think there are some new names that I see here. So just a little bit about Ritambara. We are a wellness company and we look at a holistic wellness, which is not just body, mind, but there's a whole spiritual content attached to it. And what we base our information on is the ancient knowledge that we have in our scriptures. So our topics that we always do in our webinars are self-discovery, personal transformation, health, harmony, holistic well-being, as well as the arts, which we think is a good way to connect with your creative self. So today we have for you Shri Krishnapani K.C. Raju, our program director, who will be talking on a very intriguing subject, which is titled Content, Discontent, No Content. Just before we start, I'd just like to tell you that the program will consist of 35 to 45 minutes of talk, followed by 15 minutes of question and answer. That will be moderated by Shri Krishnapani ji himself. But some protocols, you will all be muted through the talk, and I would request you to stay muted. Please don't unmute yourself through the talk because it's very disturbing for the speaker. The other thing is that if you'd like to ask any questions, there is a chat function at the bottom of your screen. Please use that and type in your questions for the speaker, and Krishnapani ji will take all the questions towards the end. But if you'd rather ask your question personally, then by all means, please just hold on, and then he will, if you can raise your hand at the end, after the chat questions are done, he will call you to speak, and then please unmute yourself at that point. So over to the program. Shri Krishnapani ji, can we invite you to please speak to us on this very, very interesting subject? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Beena ji. A very good evening to all the participants. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we will be talking on the subject content, discontent, and no content. In the English language, the word content is used in three different senses. In the sense, it is used as a noun. It's also used as an adjective and a verb also. I was just seeing the online dictionary, and when you use it as a noun, I am told it is pronounced as content. Content here means the content of something, like the contents of somebody's pocket, or contents of a drawer, or contents of the mind. Sometimes I find that it's commonly used for as content also. The adjectival form is to say that somebody is satisfied. I am content, like contentment and contented. So in that sense, it is used as in the pronunciation is content. The noun form pronunciation, as I mentioned, is content. So the context in which I am using this is when I'm saying content, it means it is something which is there, like content of one's mind is the ideas and opinions and impressions and experiences and all that constitute the content of the mind. So that is the sense in which I am using, but I may use the pronunciation content also. Please don't mind. For the sake of rhyming, I may call it as content, discontent, and no content. But when I'm saying content, it means that it has something in it, something which is contained is the content, like the contents of a book. That's how it is used. So I'll be using a PowerPoint presentation. So I'll be sharing that screen with all of you. Are you able to see the screen? Yeah?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, when we start with the first aspect of it, which is the content. Number one, the content essentially implies material and material process as such. It need not necessarily be only material. It could also be a material process. For example, an idea or an opinion is a material process. It is not something concrete or something material as such. So it's a material process. And whenever we talk about content, it implies either material or a material process. So that's the first point which I wanted to make about content. Now, the second aspect of how a content is created and how that process goes about. This process is actually a very accumulative process. It means you accumulate things, whether it is material or non-material aspects like ideas and opinions or knowledge. All that is an accumulative process, and that process is slow. That process is very slow, is laborious, and it involves time. Time is involved in the process. That means you require time to accumulate it. So these are the three aspects that are there when we are talking about the content. It's an accumulative process, and it is, as I said, slow, laborious, time involved in receiving a desired response. That means if you want something out of it, you do some action and you want a response for that action. That also involves time in it. That means the response you want is bound by time. For example, you take a very typical example of, say, something like cultivation or agriculture. You do the action, and to get the desired response, it takes its own time because there is a natural process in that. The nature responds in a certain way, and it takes time for getting the desired result. So this is the second aspect of what we call as content. Then the third one. Now, the accumulation of content involves three aspects. The interaction between the person who is accumulating it and the objective world outside. There's a world outside, and there's a person who is in the process of accumulation of content. Then there is an intermediary. There is an intermediary which we call them as the senses. The senses are the medium through which the content is accumulated. Sometimes the mind is considered as the sixth sense. So senses and mind can be put together as one aspect. And between the person who is accumulating the content and the object outside in the world, through the medium of the sense, there is a connecting link. There's a connecting link between the person who is accumulating and the object through which that accumulation process is involved. That is called as the cognitive process. That process is called as cognitive process. That means I have the, I am having the senses, say the eyes are there, and I'm looking at the object outside. So the connecting link is the seeing part of it. That means there is a seer and there is a seen, and what is linking these two is called as the process of seeing. So this is what is involved, and this interaction is involved in any process where you are acquiring or accumulating content. Then we come to the fourth point. Now this content can only be partial, limited, and fragmented, because by the very nature of things, by the very nature of things, like for example, the seer, the person himself, and the senses he has, and the object outside, the whole process can only be partial. Partial in the sense the senses have a limitation. The seer has a limitation. He cannot see the full range of things. It can only be partial. And because of the limitation imposed, for example, our hearing, we can only sense a sound within a certain range, certain decibels. Like if you're talking about frequency, it says that the frequency should be somewhere between 20 and 20,000 cycles per second. So there is a limitation. And the third aspect is you can't grasp entirely the complete thing. The whole of it can't be grasped at one stroke. So this process of content creation or content accumulation is only in bits and pieces at a time. Even, for example, if you are able to substantially grasp something, the processing mechanism and the storage and retrieval mechanism is again limited. That means your knowledge and your memory have a limitation of their own. So therefore, in that limitation, you can't see the whole thing. You can only see it in bits and pieces, and therefore it is fragmented. So this is the nature, by the very nature of things as they are, whether it is the seer, whether it is the senses, or whether it is the objective world outside, it is always partial, limited, and fragmented. Now, content has an inbuilt processing, storage, and retrieval mechanism. Now, in this mechanism, the probability of error is high. The chances that you are actually looking at and you are actually processing it or storing it, there is always a probability of error. You may not be actually seeing what it is, but you may be perceiving what you think you are seeing. So this has to be, this limitation of knowledge has to be acknowledged. We have to acknowledge that the process, there is an inbuilt process limitation whereby the problem of committing errors is high. It's quite obvious because in our daily life also we see where when we are looking at something, there are so many barriers, there are so many conditions, there are so many limitations in that, and therefore your knowledge, what you have acquired, what you have understood, or what you have stored in memory, there is always a high probability of error creeping into the whole system. This is there's nothing to do with, I would not classify it as good or bad or anything, but there's an intrinsic limitation. There's an intrinsic inbuilt process mechanism which has got this system where it can only be prone to error. It is prone to error because of the very system being as such. Then this content creation, accumulation, and maintenance needs constant reinforcement, updating, and validation. Because it is prone to error, because the possibility of making an error is high, what you need to do is you go on reinforce it. You know, go through the same experience again and again and again and again to get some kind of understanding, deeper understanding of it. Then what you have known yesterday and what you have known today about it may change. So you have to update it. Updating is you are increasing the level of your knowledge about the same thing. Like you have a software which is updated. That means they do debugging, they make changes in it, they make it more user friendly. So this updating process, mind also goes through this updating process. And finally, every time you need to test it out also. Whatever knowledge you have acquired, you have to test it out and see whether it is correct or not. Especially when you are reinforcing and updating it, immediately validation has to also to be done. Otherwise, you are not satisfied about it and the mind will not accept the whole process unless you validate through your own further experimenting and further experiencing of it. So therefore, these three aspects are involved. That is, one is creation, accumulation, and maintenance. And in order to create, accumulate, and maintain, you need to constantly reinforce it, update it, and validate it. I'm talking about the nature of knowledge, the nature of accumulation or acquisition of knowledge, or how the mind functions. The mind, that is the progressive way of doing it. That's what you call it as development, isn't it? That's what you call it as progressively increasing your knowledge base about it, and progressively you are getting more and more and deeper understanding of things. But all at the mental level, which involves content as its basis. And finally, content implicitly involves being indirect, delayed, and fraught with uncertainty. Now, content, as I said, in the process of accumulation, it is not direct. Not direct in the sense you have a barrier or you have a medium through which it has to pass. For example, the senses are a certain kind of medium. So any input has to pass through the senses and the mind. You are not actually directly in contact with the object about which you are trying to know, because the only process, only mechanism available to you is through the senses. Suppose the senses are defective. I can't see properly without my spectacles, or I can't hear properly without a hearing aid, or there is some other shortfall or lack in the instrument itself. There is a defective instrument. Then what happens is the content itself gets distorted. The content gets distorted because it is not direct, it is indirect. Then there is this delay. The process takes some time. It is not instantaneous, it's not immediate. It takes time. And in certain cases, what happens is, as I said, when you are trying to accumulate knowledge or content about some process which involves a long duration, as I have given earlier the example of cultivation. Now this is a delayed thing. Delayed in the sense, initially you won't find any response at all. After a few days, slowly the plant, the sapling comes. So there is a delayed thing, and uncertainty is also involved in it. Uncertainty is, it may come, it may not come. Most of these natural processes have that problem in that. That means every seed need not come up with a sapling. Some seeds die. Some seeds don't sprout at all. Similarly, our actions also. Every action does not necessarily give the desired response or output. I keep on making effort and nothing may happen. Suppose I am learning a lesson, or I am learning a subject which is very tough, or which is tough for me because I don't have any background. Suppose I am learning cycling, or if I am learning mathematics. What happens? There is a lot of uncertainty in that. You're putting a lot of effort, but there is no commensurate result or response from it. It takes time to reach a certain level of skill or accumulate a certain level of knowledge, which is giving you the desired response. So therefore, content implicitly involves being indirect, delayed, and fraught with uncertainty. This is what we have to understand. And with respect to any type of content, when we are talking from a human point of view, all this refers to the activities of the mind and the process of accumulation or acquisition of knowledge. So this is the nature of content. If you are able to connect with what I am saying, you will see that these 7 points are inherent in the whole system itself. The system is created in such a way that all these aspects are present in it. We are not actually finding fault with it or approving it or disapproving it or anything like that. We are trying to understand the very nature of things when we are talking about acquisition or accumulation of knowledge. this has been recognized. This has been very well recognized in the ancient Indian scriptures. And that is why this type of knowledge has been given a secondary place. I'll not go into the technicalities of it. They talk about, in the ancient Indian scriptures, they talk about what is called as pramana. They talk about what is called as pramana. Pramana is what is the standard or what is the basis of anything. One basis could be pratyaksha or direct basis. One is indirect. Second is taking the word of somebody. Agama pramana. Then they have other pramanas also, upamana pramana and other, they talk about 6. I'll not go into the technical aspect of it. But essentially we are trying to understand the nature of knowledge and the process of acquisition, accumulation, retention, retrieval, all this mechanism pertaining to knowledge is what we are what we are talking about is the content part of it. Now you see the limitation in it, the creeping in of error, the aspect of continuously updating and validating, and still the process is indirect, delayed, and fraught with uncertainty. So this is what we are talking about, the content part of it. Now, because of this limitation, it gives rise to what is called as discontent. The nature of the content of things gives rise to what we call as discontent. Number one, discontent is an inevitable and unavoidable consequence because it is not complete. Because it is fragmented, because it is partial, because it is delayed. You can attribute all the earlier points which I have mentioned as the creating discontent, which is, as I said, is an inevitable and unavoidable consequence of content. This is the nature of things. This is how it operates. And therefore, one feels discontent about it. Now, again, as I said, this discontent is on account of inadequacy, insufficiency, and incompleteness of things. Inadequacy refers to both qualitative and quantitative aspects of it. Insufficiency is the lack of something. The lack of something. When we are talking in terms of the quantitative aspect or qualitative aspect of it, we call it as inadequacy. And when there is a shortfall from our expectations, shortfall from what we want, then there is what is called as this insufficiency. And as a consequence of that, it is always incomplete, and therefore we feel discontent about it. I am correlating each point to what I have mentioned in the content. I am trying to correlate that and give you an equivalent point with respect to the discontent part of it. Then the third, discontent breeds on account of the lack of speed. You want something to happen immediately, instantaneously, it doesn't happen because the acquisition process is slow. Sometimes there is excess or lack of effort. In either case, you don't get the desired response. Even with excess effort, you don't get the desired response, and even on account of lack of effort, you do not get the desired response. So that is how discontent is bred in us. Discontent is bred in us. Next, we come to the fourth point, discontent on account of friction in interaction. We have seen that there is a need for an interaction. That means there is a person, the accumulator, or the person who is acquiring the content, and the objective world outside. So in every case, there is a friction in this interaction. Friction in the interaction is the world outside need not be according to your idea about it. Need not respond in the manner you want it to respond. The world outside, you want to see something good or pleasant, that may not occur in the world outside. And again, there is a friction between the person and his own senses also. In a certain condition, his senses give you a pleasant feeling. In a different set of circumstances, the same senses will give you a feeling of discomfort or displeasure. So there is this constant friction in interaction. This friction and interaction is both external and internal. It is internal because the same outside conditions in a certain set of circumstances may be good to you, and in a different kind of set of circumstances they are unpleasant. So the pleasant and unpleasant nature of things. See, a very typical example that Adi Shankara gives in the Bhagavad Gita is about heat and cold. Heat and cold have their own properties. Those properties are there and they are inherent and they don't change. But in winter, heat gives you pleasantness, a pleasant feeling. The same heat in summer gives you an unpleasant feeling. You see the point? The heat and cold have their own nature. Their nature is already there. There is no change in the nature. But your condition or the external conditions in the world will create that problem for you. Therefore, in winter, you would like things to be warm. In summer, you would like things to be cold. So I'm trying to emphasize this aspect of this friction in interaction is both external and internal. Then discontent is only the other side of content, and both always go together. Because of the incomplete nature of the content, because of the inadequacy and insufficiency, always discontent is just behind content. The discontent aspect of it is constantly there. And that is one of the reasons why always we feel the lack of something. And because of the impermanence of things, because the constant changes in the things and the uncertainty which we have talked about earlier also, there is discontent. There's something, we always feel something lacking in us. There's something lacking. I want something permanent. I want something stable. I want something changeless. I want something which is certain, which is for sure. But none of these things are there in the content part of it. And therefore what happens? Discontent always accompanies this process. We are always from a worldly point of view, from a worldly progress and development point of view, this may be seen as a good thing also, or as a virtue. Because if you are satisfied about a certain level of development in the outside world, it leads to stagnation and decay. Why is it that, say, for example, the mobile manufacturing companies come out with better and better and better versions? First generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation, fifth generation. So they see that from a worldly point of view, it is good to be dissatisfied, not to be contented, not to be satisfied with what you have. Otherwise, there won't be any progress. So, but from a psychological point of view, from the point of view of our life, we have this discontent always accompanying this acquisition of knowledge. That process is inevitable because of the nature of the content as we have discussed. Then, discontent arises continuously due to systemic failure built into the process itself. We have seen earlier, if you see, in the earlier thing, we have said that this process involves constant reinforcement, updating and validation, and also the probability of error being high. We have seen that earlier. So in that context, if you see this discontent aspect number 6, there is a systemic failure. That systemic failure is built into the process. It is bound to fail. The system is bound to fail. You need to reinforce it, you have to rediscover it, you have to remanufacture it or re-engineer it, and then you need to update it, you need to validate it, you need to continuously test it, and this goes on with it. It is nobody can say that this is the final word in things and this is the final thing, and then there can't be any improvement beyond this. So therefore, there is a systemic failure built into the process itself. The system is bound to fail, and you need to correct it again. You need to go back to it, improve upon it, and this is a process which cannot be helped, but the discontent will follow. Each of these aspects can be interpreted from our own psychology point of view also. I am leading a certain kind of life, and that needs approval from somebody, that needs appreciation from somebody, that needs acknowledgement from somebody, that needs if I have affection towards somebody or somebody is affectionate towards me, it's not a one-time affair. I want that affection to be reinforced on a daily basis. And I want that affection or that love or that attachment or that binding or that pleasure involved with that to be, increased on a day-to-day basis. That means yesterday you were okay, but I want you to be better today. More affectionate, more loving, more concerned. So this psychological factor also goes with it. And because that doesn't happen, the system fails. And therefore, discontent arises out of it. When that discontent arises out of it, you need to again go back to it, re-establish or reinforce your relationships, reinforce your experiences, and then hold on to the pleasures and stability of life which you are looking for. However impermanent it may be, you would at least would like the same status quo to continue for some years, some decades, and so on and so forth. So it has both the psychological aspect of it and the objective, from the objective world point of view also, it goes on with that. And finally, discontent is a concomitant of the formation of a closed loop in the content accumulation process. You see how the mind operates. The mind operates, as we have seen earlier, in this loop of experience, knowledge, memory, experience, knowledge, memory. Now, whatever experience you gather, you immediately compare it with your existing or earlier experiences. Those earlier experiences are as stored in your memory. And they are not actually stored as experiences fully. The experience is converted into a certain amount of knowledge. You convert that into a certain amount of knowledge. You remove all the unnecessary things out of it. And as I said, this knowledge or memory has this element of what is called a selective receptivity. It has a selective receptivity. It will only receive what it wants to receive. It will not receive the entire experience as it is. It will take the experience, or even if suppose I am talking to you, inherently the process involves where you don't take the entire content of what I am talking. You can't also. Whether you or me, we can't take the entire content which we are experiencing through this process of hearing. So we only selectively receive and appreciate or hold on to what you think is applicable to you or what you think you like about it. So this creates what is called as a closed loop. This is a recursive closed loop in the sense that it repeats itself. It repeats itself. That's why a human being becomes a creature of habit. A creature of habit. That means he wants the same kind of bed, same kind of pillow. He would prefer to have sleep in his own room. in a particular direction only. I would like to sit in a particular place and eat. He would like to have, he has a corner of his own. He has a route in which he will take a walk. This is the closed loop, because that gives you a certain kind of security. If you go to an unknown path for a walk, you will always have to be alert. You need to be very alert. Which way I am moving? Where am I moving? How do I come back? Kind of things come to your mind. Actually, when Krishnaji was, Jiddu Krishnamurti was talking about it, I practically tried to implement it and landed myself in trouble. I went to our university. It's a 2,200-acre campus. It has got all kinds of paths everywhere. So I said, let me explore some unknown path. And I landed up about 3 or 4 kilometers away from my home. So I had to take a long detour and then walk back, because it was an unknown territory, which the mind doesn't accept so easily, because it is always accepting something unknown is a challenge, and it calls for a lot of attention and alertness. Whereas suppose you are used to certain things, you go in the same route and unconsciously you take the same circuit and come back. So you're comfortable. So this process of creating a closed loop also breeds discontent in one way. That also creates discontent, because inside you want some kind of freedom. You want some kind of something which is adventurous, something which is new. But the mind refuses to accept something new immediately. Something new is there, it doesn't want to accept immediately. It wants to test it out. Suppose you have seen some creature, some insect or something which you have never seen in your life. Would you approach it? No, you would like to first see what it is, then probe, then find out whether it crawls or creeps or flies or what it is. So there is something new, and which your experience is unable to respond to it. So the mind, you have to understand that it operates in this closed loop. That is also bound to create discontent. So this, I have, as I said, I'll be sharing this presentation with the participants through Beenaji. You can correlate point by point to it, and because of the time factor, I don't want to get much into it. I'll take another 5 minutes to talk to you about the no content aspect of it. The no content also is correlated point by point to what I'm talking now. Now, no content or no content, by definition, is a non-material process. Because when there is something out there, something concrete, either in terms of material or a material process, then only you say there is content. When there is nothing of that sort, when there is no material or no material process involved, that is what we are calling it as no content, and by definition it's a non-material process. And again, because there is nothing to acquire, nothing to accumulate, and nothing to undergo the process of accumulation, no content is not an accumulative process at all. It's only a perceptive process. If you remember, in one of the webinars, I have talked about conception and perception. Conception is the creation of concepts. These concepts are created by the mind through the content. Whereas the no content aspect of it, or the no content aspect of it, is only a perceptive process. You see it, you perceive it. There I don't want to again elaborate on that, because I have given the definitions in that talk about what is the definition of conception, what is the definition of perception. Then no content does not involve any one-on-one interaction, as it is all inclusive. Earlier interaction we have seen is between the person, the objective world outside, and the medium and the process through which this interaction happens. That medium is the senses and the mind, and there's a process involved in that. And there has to be a one-on-one relationship between amongst the three aspects which we have talked about. But when it comes to no content, there is no one-on-one interaction, it is all inclusive. Everything is included in this. It's all inclusive by nature, because there is no interaction as it is understood, because there is no accumulation at all. There is no accumulation because there is no material at all or material process involved at all to accumulate it. Then no content by implication is holistic. Because it is all inclusive, it is holistic. And therefore it does not have boundaries, and there are no pieces to be put together. When something is all inclusive, that's what we call it as holistic. And when there is something holistic, there are no limitations to it. There are no boundaries which define that, what we call as holistic. And when it is all inclusive and when it is a perceptive process, there is no question of putting pieces together like in a jigsaw puzzle. Like in a jigsaw puzzle, what happens is your mind, when it is accumulating knowledge, this is what happens. You are putting different pieces together for the purpose of accumulating knowledge. But when you are seeing the whole thing as one, is all inclusive and holistic, and when there are no boundaries, there are no pieces to be put together. Then the no content is totally free from the need for any mechanism. Earlier we have seen that it needs a mechanism. It needs the whole system is needed for its accumulation. Here there is no need for a mechanism because there is no process involved and no material involved as such. So added benefit of this is there is no question of error creeping into it. There is no question of any error creeping into the whole system at all. So that is the beauty of what I am calling it as no content. Again, no content being independent of any externalities. It is not dependent on anything outside you. Therefore, the question of updating and validation doesn't arise at all. The question of updating it and validating it doesn't arise at all, because it is something which you are seeing, which is there and which is independent of anything outside itself. So that is the nature of what I am calling it as no content. And lastly, no content being a perception is direct, instantaneous, and unequivocal. We have seen in that earlier case it was indirect, it was delayed, and fraught with uncertainty. Here, because it's a perceptive process, it is direct, it is instantaneous, and there is no question of disputing, debating, challenging, or any kind of uncertainty involved in this. Therefore, when I'm saying no content, this is something perceptive, and this perception is direct, instantaneous, and unequivocal. This is what it is. This is what we need to understand about content, discontent, and no content. Now, putting these three aspects into the right perspective, when I'm saying content, it applies to all the processes of acquiring knowledge. Knowledge, by its very nature and the aspects involved in it as discussed, will lead to discontent, will lead to dissatisfaction, will lead to some lack of fulfillment in oneself. And what I am calling as no content is what we call in traditional terms, or more understandable terms, we call that as wisdom. This is the perspective in which we have to see. And lastly, I want to show you a small table summing up the whole thing. This is knowledge, as I said, has content. Wisdom has no content. Knowledge is sensory. whereas wisdom is supersensory. Knowledge, the process is accumulative here, whereas the process is perceptive here. Knowledge is fragmented, whereas wisdom is holistic. The probability of error is very high in knowledge, whereas in wisdom it is error-free. The action based on knowledge is always partial, limited, and delayed, whereas action based on wisdom is total, free from limitations, and instantaneous. Action based on knowledge leads to karma. Karma, it also involves the reaction to things. And it is direct, and the consequences of such action are personal. The consequences of karma are personal. But when it comes to wisdom, the action here is free from karma. That means there is no reaction and there are no direct or personal consequences when you are operating through wisdom. Then action is selfish, exclusive, and for personal benefit or profit when it comes to knowledge. And when it comes to wisdom, action is all-inclusive and is for the welfare of the world. Adi Shankara talks about Loka Sangraha. In his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, he says, all actions of a wise man are for the welfare of the world. The actions of a jnani are always for Loka Sangraha. And finally, to end it on a lighter note, to know that tomato is a fruit is knowledge. Not to put it in a fruit salad is wisdom. Thank you so much.